Hey everybody, welcome to Switched On with Paul and James. Uh, I am Paul, and of course with me is James. Say hi, James.
Hi there.
Um, Today on a very special Switched On, we talk about James's problem with no, it's not that. We're gonna switch up the format a little bit sometimes. So today we're gonna do, and I was trying to brainstorm like a catchy name for what this might be, like a switched on uh the light flicker or whatever, because we have that like light bulb metaphor and the power, but I couldn't think of like uh, uh, a really catchy like light bulb or like um power kind of metaphor. So I don't know, we'll think of something when we put it out there, but as of right now, just imagine that I said something really smart and catchy as a name for what we're doing. But regardless, what we're doing is it's just going to be me and James, and it's just going to be we're gonna pick a recent piece of news from the universe and just beat the living crap out of it for 15-20 minutes, something like that, and dive deep and kind of nerd out. I think it's a little bit like inside baseball for our preps for these things, because you and I sit down and just kind of hash out some of this stuff anyway as we
Yep.
try to find guests, or when we try to like come up with topic plans or whatever for our stuff, and we figure, hell, let's just put it out in the world and see what happens, right? Because it kind of winds up being valuable for us in all of our approaches to other things. And screw it, let's just put it out in the world and see what happens. So it'll also be available on video. We'll put a video out on our YouTube channel, so I guess we'll start to make money from that. And when we do, and I guess we'll monetize that, and like within weeks I'm sure we'll be seeing sponsorship offers and all that kind of stuff. So just like, James, hang on tight, it's coming, it's coming soon. So anyway, blah 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 blah. Today we were directed to an interesting piece in VentureBeat that we'll link in the description here. The title of the piece is, and it fits with so much of the stuff we talk to, I can't believe we don't just sit down and talk about this every day, is the title of the piece is how Microsoft plans to improve the low code landscape. And there's just tons of stuff going on, both in terms of like the recent stuff from Build, right, and earlier things both this year and last year with new pieces of stuff and things out in the universe that are indicative clearly of Microsoft having a pretty big and expansive vision for low code. So James, what are you seeing when you look at a piece like this and the stuff that they're talking about here?
It's interesting. I mean, we kind of talked before the show here. There's the to be,
Yeah.
what Gardner and other pundits are, prognosticating, I suppose, for pick your milestone year 2025. There's
Yeah.
different flavors of it, but obviously low code is a huge trend. Saw massive increase in the amount of
Yeah.
business just within Microsoft last year. What it
Yeah.
was, some crazy number, over 100% growth, and all of that. But
And
you
I'm
know,
assuming much the same for like other vendors in the space too, because
sure,
you
yeah,
can't swing a dead developer without hitting a low code platform somewhere popping up. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
anyway, it's just everywhere, everywhere.
yeah. I think it's what's somewhat difficult to quantify here is I'll use the word novelty, and that's probably not a fair characterization, but how much of the low code stuff that's happening today is true production grade, strategic.
Oh yeah,
We're really working together, in that fusion team construct, and solving problems versus maybe a little trial and error. I mean, let's see
I
if I
mean,
can.
does it kind of remind you of those early days of like Fiori, where half the projects you would do would be like some customer out there being like, we just want to get our feet wet and try a use case and see if
Yeah,
it's the right thing for us. And it almost always was, and there'd always be more work after that, right? But the
right.
the point is like, I think to your point, a lot of times you know, if you are not the techie firm producing the tool, if you're a consumer of the tool and then using it for other purposes, you need to like swing that hammer and bang on the whatever you're banging on to kind of get, here's how heavy it is. Here's what happens
Yep.
when I hit a nail with it. Here's what happens when I hit not a nail with it, right? Here's what happens
Sure.
when I hit my thumb with it. Like, like, and that's like that's just there's, I'm sure somebody has a smart word for that sort of part of the life cycle of products and tools, and even, generalized like categories even, right, where there's
Right.
like the intended audience has to like go blow their fingers off with the fireworks before they get how fireworks work, and then they're like, oh, this is
Yeah.
awesome, we use fireworks all the time, and the early adopters just have like mangled fingers from how they did that the first time, but they get there, right? And so maybe
Yeah.
that's the phase that we're in here with low code too, is that I mean, I guess low code hasn't, it's not like low code's a new thing, but the new the newest wave of tools is a new thing, generally speaking. And I think there is a case to be made that enough people are still sort of scratching their heads and wanting to try, versus, to your point, only like 2% of the apps make it to productive use, or whatever the number is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an interesting topic, and I feel like we talk about it so much around here that I don't know if it's just tired of hearing myself speak, or if customers are equally tired of this whole conversation.
Yeah.
But it's, to me, such a, you can talk about what Gartner says, and even what the vendors like Microsoft are saying, but what is particularly interesting for me is where customers are starting to move in terms of their mindsets. In fact, we had
Yeah.
a conversation with a customer last week that was, they have a suite of apps that are being built currently, and they're essentially being built from the ground up, and we see these types of custom apps in the wild all the time. It's, we've got data from a variety of systems that we're going to somehow aggregate into like a SQL Server database, and then we're going to build, like an ASP.NET app on top of it. And in this case, it was kind of a mixed bag of, some of the UIs are built in React and others in Angular. But the bottom line was, when you put together the bill of materials for that type of an app, there is an awful lot of pro code magic that goes into that.
Oh yeah, man. By the way, when
And
you said in the wild, immediately I was like, in my head, I'm like, crikey, James, there's a React front end with a SOAP UI, or a SOAP RESTful, there's a SOAP interface in the back end, and we're gonna shoot it and see what happens. Like that's where my head went when you said in the wild. And because
yeah,
because like it's like it's such a hodgepodge of things that get discovered that way, because anyway, I'm sorry, I'm tangenting, I'm like tangenting in the middle of your tangent there. Let me shut up for a sec, sorry about that, go ahead.
no. So, I think the interesting thing about that conversation was, it's not a referendum on React versus Angular versus Vue versus Fiori versus, whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
some of those traditional tech conversations about, can we use this framework or that framework, and, just incremental improvements in terms of performance or productivity. The questions this customer is at, we're asking us, we're more focused on scalability.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably these are well-crafted apps that were put together, we'll assume, very professionally with, quality designs and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
The big fear is the proliferation of those apps and the support and O&M cost that comes with it. And, what is the total cost of ownership for one app, let alone 10 or 50 apps looks like?
Yeah.
And I think, comparatively speaking, if you do a side by side comparison with low code, you're starting at easily 50% reduction in TCO, and it's
Yeah.
probably quite a bit higher than that. And so, these articles to me are very interesting in the sense that whether it's 2025, 2027, pick your date, it feels like there's a shift in the development economics of all this. It's
Yeah.
and that's the part that I think as an IT consulting firm, we maybe look at this slightly different in the sense that I don't look at this as a threat to, oh my gosh, we won't be able to, compete in the market. We won't be able to build React apps anymore. We won't be able to do, this. It's
Mhm.
imagine what we could do if we were able to build solutions faster, cheaper, more effective using low code tools, and then use the remaining budget to do the things that we never really get to today, be it machine learning or the really value add kinds of things that
Yeah.
just never happen.
It's like it's got this. It's like it helps the equation of, or the state of, there is. It's like these days we and customers spend a lot of time with like super awesome tools for super simple use cases. And that doesn't leave a lot of time and budget for super awesome tools up against super hard use cases. And that's the effective thing right there, right?
Yeah.
Is using lower level languages and lower level tools and more complex and compute intensive, tools and approaches for the hard things, because like 75% of the Fiori apps you ever built didn't need Fiori, really, right? Or didn't need SAP UI5 custom handholding from soup to nuts, right? It
Yeah.
could have been a power app or whatever, right? That, which by the way is kind of fits in with some of the because this venture beat piece calls out kind of some of the ways that enterprises need to have, or that low code needs to perform for enterprises. And
Hmm.
one of the things which I thought was the key was iteratability in terms of dev cycles. Like there's a sense of, like, to me, where, and I think this is commonly known, but like when you think about the whole life cycle of, you know, create, test, fix, deploy to production, gather feedback, blah, 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 all that whole thing, right? The smaller you make the loops inside that, it doesn't matter if I do create, test, create, test, create, test, create, test. If I can do that really fast, I've made the rest of the loop that much tighter, even if I
Yeah.
repeated some small part of the loop multiple times. And this is that's what low code is giving folks, I think, too, is right, is that sort of that dev test or dev poke level of things is getting done earlier in the process, and getting done by people who don't necessarily have to have the mega tools in their toolkit to do that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about in our last season of the podcast of, this idea that, um, there's this divide between citizen developers and pro code developers.
Yeah.
And the things that I think the Fusion team concept unlocks is a world where IT and the business get together and play their respective strengths. And, for the IT team to look at, hey, the business has this really aggressive plan to do digital transformation in this area. Here's all the apps they want to build and the interfaces and, whatever else. But to look at that from the lens of, okay, well, my role in this is really focused on API enablement and a couple
Right.
things over here where, it's not such a daunting, oh God, how am I going to create, 20 apps in 6 months? Um, that scale is, I mean, something I've never seen, from
Yeah.
a professional standpoint, and that ability, I mean, it's, again, start to, you know, get into too much hyperbole, but I mean, it's truly transformative.
Yeah. It is. It is. Yeah. You won't catch me arguing with you on that piece for sure. Everything else, yes, but that piece, no. So another thing I think too is that called out here, and I think is kind of mirrored by Satya's keynote in Build last week, because one of the things he said was that data is your most important architectural consideration in like anything. I mean, and that's like slap you in the face true everywhere you look. Like that couldn't be more true of anything in the last God knows how many years, right? Data
Yeah.
is the thing that you're looking at. And these what a lot of these low code tools do outside of just the UI piece of things is really, I think when you talk about the workflows, you talk about some of the automation, they really slim down those data channels. So you're really kind of, everyone is feeding from a slightly more similar trough, right? When you can take those things into consideration as well. I think it's those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said for, when you unpack some of these low code platforms, at the center of them, and I'll use Power Platform as an example. Dataverse becomes a hub for so many things beyond app development, right? I mean, it's a centralized database. You have what amounts to an API control plane
Yeah.
built in day one, plays very nicely with API management tools. And so when you're putting your enterprise architecture hat on and trying to figure out how do I go from zero to digital transformation, let's say. I've got gazillions of Excel spreadsheets and access databases lying around my enterprise, unstructured data, semi-structured data, etc. Like I just need to start creating on ramps for pulling some of this stuff in. And realistically, there's no way I'm going to just refactor all this overnight. I'm not going to,
No.
create net new apps for everything. But if I can start building that hub,
Yeah.
then now I've got something that I can start to measure progress, right? I mean, I can
Yeah.
start to see what has been brought into my enterprise portfolio, and it has just such a compounding effect of, well, we've already got the data here, we've already got the API, so now it's not so much a question of a onesie twosie, how much does this particular app move the needle? It's how much does the effort that went into this app or this integration unlock in terms of other aspects of my business. And I
Yeah.
think that's where, um, I mean, I guess you could make the argument, consolidated databases and, the theory behind ERP and all of that. But um, that is something that I don't think a lot of enterprises have really had
No,
uh,
I don't think
up
so.
until very recently.
Another quick uh, peek inside my mind here is, when you said zero to digital transformation, smash cut to my viewing. I saw the movie Spaceballs and Dark Helmet commanding them to go after it, and these commands the guy to go to ludicrous speed, right?
Yeah.
And then to me, the next speed after that is digital transformation, right?
Yeah.
They've gone plaid, but then whatever's next after plaid, that's digital transformation. Anyway, so that the zero to digital transformation. That's we'll keep that for both humor and insight, I think here. So let's
Yeah.
talk about
Probably a better way to say that.
Let's talk about some of the Microsoft plans then for these things, right? So I wanted to ask you about Power Pages, because that's not something I am familiar with, broadly speaking. Because I mean, I've used, page builder tools and things like that. I mean, all over the universe, right? WordPress and whatever else. I don't even know if that compares to what Power Pages is. But tell me about what you kind of take from where Power Pages is maybe pointed at or going.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're not familiar with the concept, so in Power Pages is kind of the successor to Power Apps Portals, which,
Mm.
was probably in large part a successor to the portal integration that was there with Dynamics 365. And,
Oh, sure.
for all intents and purposes, the historical usage has really been focused around self-service portal experiences.
Mm.
So particularly as it relates to Dynamics, you think about Dynamics having their CRM portfolio of apps, being able to build using low code esque technologies, a self-service portal experience on top of that is a very powerful thing. And um, when you start to zoom out and look at where they are with Power Pages, it's to some extent exactly what you're describing. I mean, the UX designer tools are much more user friendly. So,
Mm.
whether it compares favorably to WordPress, I suppose it's beauty's in the eye of the beholder there. But, um, you have that capability, with a nice CMS behind it and so forth. But I think more importantly, it's all the deep integration work that Microsoft has done in two areas. Number one, integrating with Dataverse, meaning that you can start to stack these technologies on top of one another. So I can build out
Right.
my ERP and my CRM and maybe my custom apps on Dataverse, and then I can reuse those UX components at a higher level of abstraction. I can reuse those security models, and I can actually incorporate them into those self-service portal experiences. So, you think about the ability to kind of, write once, run anywhere sort of mindset. That
Hmm.
there's something to that with this Power App or Power Pages concept. The other thing there is the deep integration with Azure AD and Azure AD B2C,
Yeah.
which makes it very, I won't say easy, but very doable to manage all kinds of identities at scale.
It's the answer to the question of why everyone has such a hard time with portals to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you can start just imagining the value of being able to have a tool that you invest all this time and energy in building internal apps that are keeping track of pick a department in the enterprise, the service,
Mm.
service orders and tasks and status updates and all this stuff. And then imagine having a tool that makes it pretty easy to take it one step further, put it out into the universe for your customers to be able to see in real time. This is the
Yeah.
status of your ticket, uh, and any information that you want to share. So that's just another extension of this whole concept. That
Yeah.
it's spiraling out in all kinds of different dimensions.
I mean, yeah, it's the answer to a lot of questions, or it has the potential to be answered, and the answer to a lot of questions that we've answered before with custom dev and with lots of consulting hours, I would say. Um, Express design. This is something that caught my eye huge because this is the capability of take a drawing or a sketch of something and literally turn it into a power app.
Hmm.
That like that blows my mind on a couple of fronts. One, of course, is that it kind of pushes the edge of like, oh yeah, there still is room for tech to be magic a little bit, which I like in the universe. But two, and possibly, well, no, I would say more important, but what part of what that things like that and like OpenAI codecs and the power effects formulas and like that kind of stuff, it really represents to the the branch of the applied AI slash ML that is focused on development tooling is one of the richest veins of stuff out there right now in terms of getting usefulness and whatever out of AI for human productivity. In other words, for years and years, I think we've always thought like, oh man, when are our bots gonna take over for like the clerks and stuff like that? Well,
Hmm.
I don't know. but certainly some part of our developer jobs are being thought about pretty strongly by AI these days, right? It's not
Yeah.
this, and I don't mean that in the sense of like necessarily that an AI is going to take my job, but I do mean it in the sense that some of the things that I do as a developer are more easily AI fungible than anybody would have thought.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of funny. So, my oldest son, he is in college right now studying to do animation. And,
Yeah.
one of the things that came out of build is a little tiny sliver, but Satya was showing off a designer working in Maya and having that similar, code completion,
Yeah.
GPT style.
Yeah.
I want to move these items on the canvas, in
Yeah.
different ways. And I was showing it to him, and I mean, for a beginner, which is where he's
Mhm.
at, where he's having to do all this stuff by hand and his assignments, his eyes got all big as he's looking at, and I mean, we see it. Even things like Visual Studio 2022.
Yeah.
When I'm writing code, I'm
That's
kind of amazed
ridiculous.
that did you mean to implement this entire function? Would you like me to write it for you?
And I'm
Yes.
like, yes, I did. Oh my God, please, thank you.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so it's yeah. The productivity increase with stuff like that. I mean, for years and years, as we've tried to train consultants around here, there's always been this question of you have to know the syntax to be able to do your job. But I don't want you to spend an eternity memorizing syntax.
Yeah.
It's every developer starts to build up this capability of googling stuff well
Yeah.
to
Yep.
find but I mean it's such a wasted energy.
Yep.
The
Yeah.
more the system is able to say, I know what you're trying to do, let me just fill
Yeah.
in the gaps.
Yep.
It's huge.
Huge. Well, and I think that's probably a good place to wrap the discussion because that's actually kind of how the venture beat piece wraps too. In other words, Microsoft sees AI as core to low code. And I think that's part and parcel with how A, with how we look at things, but B, with how the future, how do I say this, the the 3 years from now is going to be so different than what we think it is, that is exciting to just hold on for the ride, I guess. I don't know how else to
Yeah.
say it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's such a smart way of I'll say filling in the gaps, because
Yeah.
I think, and I won't pick on the vendor, but I saw an example of a low code tool where, um, if you wanted to integrate this low code tool with SAP, the demo showed, like basically leave a post-it note on the canvas, reminding a developer to go, wire up some OData for you after the fact and things like
Yeah.
that. And I think it largely came down to there are certain tasks that are somewhat technical in nature that, for a non-developer type, they may not be able to very they may have a general sense of what they want to do, but they probably can't verbalize it very well.
Yeah.
And rather than trying to solve that exclusively through visual components of wizards and just this endless array of, let me keep tweaking the UI until it's, where we want it. I think that's a fool's errand. You're never going to get there.
Yeah.
But
Never.
tools like GPT, on the other hand, um, if I can just sort of say verbally, this is kind of what I want to do, and have the system go figure it out, then now I think we're moving it at a speed that we have not been able to get to with a lot of these
Beyond
low-code tools.
comprehension. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna call it. We're wrapped. On behalf of us at Switched On colon catchy new name, we're signing off for now with more to come in the future in the James and Paul bonk their nerd heads together space. But for now, thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks.